Hello, this is Matilda, and thank you for tuning in. I have my friend Ida. She's on the line with me, and today we are going to talk about grief. It's not the most fun topic, but it is, I think, something that each and every one of us at some point in time will go through, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a parent, a sibling, and hopefully we'll get some words of encouragement from even her own experience of experiencing grief and how she trusted God and, relied on God for strength in the midst of loss and pain. So, before we start, how are you?
I'm well by God's grace,
Yeah.
What can we say? The joy of the Lord is our strength.
Amen. How did grief come to your doorstep?
So, like you said earlier, grief is something that everyone goes through at a certain point in time in their life. The only thing that, makes it, I think, very difficult is, nobody knows when it's going to happen, So, with my situation, I recently lost my mom. Actually, this month is going to be 6 months.
Wow.
At the end of the month.
Wow.
And I can't even believe it's been 6 months already. But it's very difficult. It happened so fast. There was no time to process it. And the more I study about grief and the more I look into stuff, I realized that I was one of the people that dealt with it, like, in the beginning, like, I was just in total shock.
Right.
Because I didn't see it coming. And it was even difficult to cry, especially even in the hospital, because I was kind of like in denial at the moment. And it's one of those things where, as a Christian, you trust God until the very end, And that was where I was. Like, even when numbers were dropping, things were happening, I still held on to the faith. And that really helped me. But at the end of the day, I still had time to go back and process everything.
Right.
It's quite interesting. But that's where I'm going to start.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've also have experienced grief myself, and I lost my dad. I think it's now 2.5 years now. Like, you still remember the details just as if it was yesterday. And like you said, I mean, if it's from prolonged illness, there is some kind of preparation, but in your case, it wasn't. It was just a total shock, Just like you, I was also in some kind of denial. So it's like you can't really cry. You feel the hurt and the pain, but you can't really cry. At some point, I felt bad that I couldn't cry as much as I thought I should be crying. So can you talk about some of the stages that you've had to go through, from the point of it being a shock till at what point were you able to finally begin to cry? Were there any triggers? Were there any particular things that made you cry? And also anything around, some of the things that people said or did that kind of maybe brought some kind of comfort to you? Can you share some words on
Sure.
that?
So I'm going to start from the fact that I think one of the reasons why it was difficult for me to process the whole thing was it didn't happen in my regular surroundings, first of all. My mom had just come to visit me from Ghana to the States, and unfortunately it happened here, but she had gone to visit another set of family and friends when it happened, and I had never been to that city. I had to rush there. I wasn't familiar with anything there. Thank God for close friends and family that were there to help, But the way the whole thing went was, in the hospital and everything, I just could not process anything, to be honest. I was just in shock, especially for the fact that it went from her talking to me when I got there and everything. She was a little delirious, but she was still okay. So from her talking to me and everything, and I stayed up with her the whole night. It was like, I remember clearly, right around 5:36 a.m., I had told her I was tired, and I was just telling her, to try to settle down, because she was just very restless. And if I remember correctly, the very last thing she said to me was, "Oh, my dear, like, go lie down, try to rest. And, we should both try to rest." She said, "I'm not able to sleep very well right now, but you go lay down, I'll be fine." Basically, is what she told me. So I went and laid down. Within, minutes, I'll say maximum half an hour, 45 minutes, I just heard from my sleep, them waking her up, trying to get her up out of her sleep. And I was totally confused. I just jumped out of the bed and, to cut a long story short, that was where my shock began. I'm like, are you kidding me? And when someone quotes like that, they make you walk out of the room and whatnot for them to intervene and whatnot. So the whole time I was walking the hallways, I was walking like a crazy person in the hospital, up and down the hallways, asking God, come on now, this cannot be it, And I was praying at the same time, speaking in tongues up and down. I'm like, and it's like, at that moment, this is the first time I've gone through something like this. So at that moment, it's more or less I didn't even know what to do, honestly, but to pray and talk to God. It almost became like I was talking to God more often than I even do. I'm like, "God, please, this cannot be it. Try to do something, that kind of thing." But eventually, when everything happened, basically, the whole thing happened from the hospitals to when Mom passed away was 5 days. Everything happened within 5 days. So once she called it, of course, you can't talk to her, you can't do anything. But I was talking to her, singing, praying. And the one common denominator through all of this is God. Just being a Christian and, believing in your faith and going through the whole thing. So once everything happened, even up until the very end, I had not cried yet, to be honest with you. I was just praying and more singing, things that were soothing to me and things that I thought were helping her. So once everything happened, days after, that was when it hits me real hard. Because, it's a different thing when you have your family member in the bed. Right. It's like they're processing things. It's like at that point you're in the battlefield. That's how I saw it. In the battlefield where you're trying to make things happen by God's grace. But at the same time, at the point, I just had to tell God, let your will be done. Type of situation, because it was just too uncertain. So, of course, I cried after the whole thing. That was when it hit real hard. And then insomnia kicked in. I wasn't able to even... So, for sure, I went through that stage of denial. After all of this, I went back to try to be reading more about grief and more of grief to see how to help myself, And one of the things I'll say is, when it first happens, you have all kinds of people who want to talk to you, who want to text you. You realize that some people are only there to be nosy and find out what happened. People that you haven't heard from in years or months. Other people are there who genuinely care about you. But I realize that we all deal with it differently. Right. Initially, I didn't want to talk to anyone much. I was better texting people. I felt like I was okay with texting and whatnot. People who will call will just make me start crying all over again. And I felt like there were moments where, if I feel like I'm okay for right now, I just don't necessarily want to go into crying again. You know what I mean? Especially if maybe you had cried all night type thing. So, to cut a long story short, I'll just say that the denial stage is very, very real, and the shock is very real, especially if everything happens so suddenly. For someone that was already working on their own 2 feet, doing everything on their own, there was nothing wrong with them. We literally spoke every day, video called every day. She wasn't feeling too well here and there, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. It was winter. It was her first winter here. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, for sure. She even said she was okay, so you can imagine. So it's just one of those things, but I don't know if I'm still in line with the question, but
oh yes.
The difference. One thing I'll say is something that I read. I think you asked the question about when you feel like you're grieving too much or something like that.
Right.
It is when it goes into some form of depression. And it's like you're too sad to do anything.
Right.
It becomes a problem.
Right.
But at the same time, when you get to that stage, either have to try to talk to someone or try to pull yourself out of it. For the most part, whenever I got into a level like that, I just like straight away went into prayer. Because forget it, I couldn't pray at that moment.
Right.
You know, that you don't have the strength to even pray, and that's where I was. Like pray, it was just like short prayers, like God, please, like help me, like nothing like deep, serious prayers.
Right.
But once I turned on music, it just uplifted me so much. Like I didn't even realize how much that does me. I don't know if it's because I sing or if I'm musically inclined. That was one of the source of my strength.
Yeah.
Rather than even talking to anybody or anything like that.
Right.
Besides my husband and very close family members that understood where I was coming from.
I like the point that you raised about, we all go through grief differently. And also about the fact that, like when you're faced with it, it's okay to grieve. Because I think one of the things that, even for me, people were saying, oh, don't cry.
That's the worst thing I want to hear.
Like, please allow me. There's something that at least crying does to you. I don't know about you. When I was young, one of the things that I used to do, like when my mom would discipline me, I would literally cry and stand in front of the mirror.
See what you're
to see how much and I need to cry some more. But on a more serious note, like I think crying also to some extent helps some people to be able to deal with it. But like you said, like don't stay in it. That is where the problem begins, when you find yourself constantly, in that state. Then it's beginning to turn into something else. That's where you have to do something, talk to someone, or like you said, find like music is a source of strength to you. And I think music has so much power, because even in the Bible we learn about how through music, when David played music to the king Saul, it drove away evil spirit. Like music has an atmosphere, and it affects so much of our mood. And so when you feel sad, even me, not even during grief, but like when I'm going through difficult situations and I'm down and sometimes I cry, if I can't do anything, I just put in music and, like you said, praise. Like it can totally turn the atmosphere around. And I think that's a very great that's a very great point.
And even when you realize it deeply, when you start listening to more and more music, especially all the Christian and gospel music, you realize that most of these lyrics are from the Bible anyway. So it's more or less like you are listening to scripture, but in a different way. Exactly.
Wow.
You just have to find the ones that work for you.
That's very great. Thanks for sharing that. And so one thing that I want to find out from you, because I'm thinking of people who are also going through grief sometimes, and I think it's for many people, sometimes it's like you don't know what to tell them, right? Like, or what to do. So for you in particular, and I have in mind knowing that everyone goes through grief differently, but for you in particular, like what are some of the things that people did or people said that brought some kind of comfort to you?
Sure. So I'll say one of the main things that really helped me was people that called and people that reached out, even through text message, not saying anything really, just saying that I've heard about it, I'm here for you. Whenever you need me, I'm here for you. And then it's not just that one text message, I'm here for you, and then you don't hear from them anymore. Those that constantly kept checking. I had a few people that would deliberately send me a scripture every day, every other day, And then it made me know that, oh, these people are really thinking about me, type thing. And I had those that would just call and not even try to hear about anything. They'll just pray for me, pray for me and let me know that these things happen, but you're going to get through it slowly but surely. Take your time. There's no rush, that kind of thing. And the people that took the time out, even go the extra mile to show up, to see how I was doing, like the church family was just amazing. Everyone in church was just so great. And I love the fact that some people, you could tell that as soon as they called, what happened? That was the question, one of the questions that was always pissing me off. Let that not be the first question. And I became sensitive to it too. That this is one lesson I'm going to take and learn for myself.
Right.
That when I hear that someone has lost a loved one, that will not be my first question.
Yeah.
It might come up at some point. Depending on your relationship with the person, and that's what I realized.
Yeah.
Depending on how close the person was to me, was how determined how upset I got with that question. Those who were very close to me, I realized that was not their first question they were asking. They will comfort me first, say words of encouragement to me first, and then maybe another time they even ask what happened, and I feel more at ease to tell them what happened. Do you understand? And no one should ever feel obligated to explain what happened. If you don't feel like it, you don't have to say it at that moment,
Right.
But I do believe that at some point it's even good closure for people that are close to whoever you have lost, because the shock goes all around. You're not the only one that experiences the shock, Like I said, one of my aunts sent me a Bible verse. That was I think one of my first comforting verses, because I'd never even read that verse in the Bible, It's from Isaiah 57, verse 1 and 2. It talks about how good people die young, and, God is just trying to protect them from the world. Like, that verse struck me in that moment. It's like I needed it, because that was the kind of person my mom was. Because up until this whole thing, like I used to think, not in the bad way, but I used to think that people who died young is like God was just trying to take them, and I don't know, but I never really thought about it deeply as Him trying to protect them from things. Because when you think about it, a lot of young people that die so early, you realize that they are such good people for some reason. So that also helped mold me in the sense that I started, being more cautious of my life. That
Right.
God forbid, but if it happens to me today, I want to be as good as Mommy was.
And your
I want
mommy
to
was
be
great.
close to God as she was. Yeah, little things like that. So just to summarize everything, mostly Bible verses, and then all these songs that I had, some songs that I didn't even hear before. People were sending to me to listen, and that was very helpful. And you just have to find ways to get through it. But also, I believe deeply in, the Bible verse that says, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I feel like the number one thing that helped is being Christian, if anything at all, because I don't know how unbelievers do it. I now understand how people go into deep depression and addictions that they cannot come out of, and things like that, because it's a conscious effort. Like, you have to know what to do to help yourself get out of these things. And not everybody is able to do that, Some people need extra help, Some people need extra help. You have to realize that you need the help in order for someone to be able to help you.
Right.
That's the one thing I would say. Yeah.
That's very true. So definitely, if you know someone who is going through grief, one of the ways to be there for them is to show that you care for them first, and not necessarily want to know everything that has happened. Because show care to them first. Very great. Okay, so now after the funeral, because I know before the funeral everyone is asking you, how can I help you? People are visiting you and all that. But after the funeral, for friends, it's like, okay, we've helped you, everything is done. Or maybe let's say a few weeks after the funeral. But then you who still have the loss, you still have that, I don't want to use the word emptiness in a sense, but you still feel the loss, right?
Well, I was gonna say, I feel like after the funeral is actually when it hit me the most. Like after the memorial and everything, when it became more like, oh wow, this has really happened.
It's true, yeah.
You know.
Initially, like with the shock, many times you are not able to process it fully, right? And then towards the funeral, and even during the funeral, like you have a lot of people around you, so it's kind of a shared sense of loss. But then once everyone goes to their homes and you are now home, like during your quiet times when you are in the kitchen or even taking a shower, for me, like some of the things, like I used to get flashes of moment, you know, especially when I'm taking a shower, and then I would just cry. And then I guess I used to cry in the shower because I felt the water would just wipe it off. So by the time I come out, I don't look like I was crying. So how did you cope after everyone had left, after the funeral?
Yeah. Well, so after everything was over, like more or less, like it wasn't fully over too, because everything was not normal. But I wouldn't go into details with all that stuff. You know, it wasn't like a typical normal thing. But after everyone had left, it's more or less like even that same night, you know, like that same weekend after everyone who came from out of town had left and everything, I just went into the bathroom just to use the bathroom, and it just hits me right there. Like, wow, mom is really gone. Like, seriously. So then I started crying all over again, and I spent some time alone in the bathroom, and as usual, I turned on my music, and I took a shower, you know, wiped away all the tears, and I came back in the room, and for sure, the first few weeks, I could not even sleep. I would sleep, and I would think I slept so much. I wake up, and it's only an hour. I'm like, really? It was very, very difficult. So, but then, you know, I just told myself, it wasn't even the time for me to do any research or try to reach out to anyone or talk to anyone. But the one thing, I just, you know, Googled, you know, if it's normal to be crying after the fact. Because this was my first actual experience with grief, even though I've learned about it in psychology and whatnot. It's like, I feel like you learn all these things and you don't really need them or use them until it really happens to you. You are not out of, you know, context or whatever. But I Googled it, and, you know, once it said it was normal, I really let it out. I let it out, you know. Like, I'll be driving somewhere, and then that's when I'll cry. Most of the times I cried was when I was alone, or when I'm alone, you know, because whenever I'm with, like, family or anything, like, when I start crying, of course, oh, it's okay. Sometimes I don't even want that. I just want to let it out. You know, like the whole don't cry thing. Sometimes you really don't want to hear it. Because it's like, how don't you just not cry? Like, it doesn't make sense. But anyway, so something, and I realized that letting it out really, really helps me. Because once I stop, I stop. But it's like when someone halfway, or when you're not done, once they leave you or you're alone again, it comes right back. But at moments when you are by yourself and you let it all out, don't stop it yourself, and you tell yourself it's okay, you know, like enough for right now. But I talked to a few different people that have gone through it too, and I realized that helped me a lot too. Like, I have a few co-workers that lost their parents and their siblings, you know, recently or like a few years ago. Speaking to them was one of the things that really, really, really helped me, because it's like I realized that the things they went through or the things they had gone through is the same thing I'm going through. Because the one lady, she's like, I really, really admire her. I work with her, and she's so strong. Like, I see her as a very strong person. But she told me, like, there was one day where her husband was not home, her kids were not home. She went to go take a shower because she was supposed to go somewhere. That was when it really hit her. And she cried so much. You know, I realized that different people, from the different people I spoke to, it's like, they all just try to be on the back burner and keep doing what they're doing. Some of them try to pick up more hours at work, and then they just go bum, 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 bum. Like, working, doing different things to distract them. But it always catches up to them.
Right.
And which is a point that I will make, because I realize that if you ignore your feelings, if you ignore the fact that you know you are sad, if you ignore that you are crying and you just wipe off your tears because you don't want anyone to see you and whatnot, eventually it doesn't seem to help. So I would say, you know, let it out, you know.
Right.
Cry when you need to, speak when you need to. Someone even told me, like, when you're alone, act like you're talking to mom. You know, I thought that one was a little weird, but it helped, you know. It helped.
Yeah.
Honestly, it helped. I was just stuck there. I'm like, Mom, so really, you're really gone. Like, are you kidding me? Like, type thing. Like, you know, like, being silly, like how I'll be with her or whatnot. And it kind of helps. You're not getting a response back.
Right.
But another thing that really helped me was, thank God for WhatsApp. You know, like, African parents like to leave voice notes.
Yeah.
I had a couple of voice notes from her. And I have one, like who knew? Like, last year on my birthday, she called me. We spoke and everything all throughout the day, but she still left me a voice note, like a prayer voice note.
Wow.
She prayed for me in that voice note. And this year on my birthday, I knew that if I had listened to it on my birthday, I would have really, really cried. So I waited a few more days after.
Yeah.
And I listened to it. Of course, it's like, once this happens to you, it's like, the after stages is so easy to cry. I didn't even realize that. It doesn't take a lot to cry.
Yeah.
You know, I don't cry that easily. You know, something will have to trigger my crying, but nothing triggers it nowadays if it wants to come. You know. But just these little things, like let it out when you need to let it out. Because no matter how strong you are, you know, losing someone, thinking about the fact that you're never going to see them again until in eternity or when God calls you home as well. It's difficult. And that's the one thing I'll say. There's no day that has passed by without me thinking about mom or thinking about my mom. But the way you deal with it is what makes the difference. Is what I would say. You know, because you can't just think about it and cry all the time. But you have your days. I realize that holidays trigger it, and everyone just gives me little advice here and there. Like I said, a few of my coworkers have experienced this, so they just will tell me. The one day, on Mother's Day, one of them just texted me, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you, holidays are the hardest." You know, that kind of thing. And he was right. I cried so much that day on Mother's Day, like, and I don't know where it came from. And it started from right when I woke up. You know, there are a lot of random moments when you find yourself crying. Just don't stay in it. That's just all out. Don't stay in it. Try your best not to stay in it.
And I agree. Like, holidays can be pretty tough, but I think one thing that is also comforting, I think over the years, one of the things is you begin to kind of cherish more the moments that you spend with them. One of the things that this experience, and I've also come to like to watch people's memorial service, just to hear how people talk about people who have left, and just to get wisdom on how I can live my own life. So that's very important. Like talking to people, like you said, people who have gone through similar things. Wow.
It makes you definitely feel like you're not alone.
And one thing that I'm glad that you have consistently talked about, the fact that your faith in Christ was your source of strength. When we are away from this body, once we know Christ, then we are in the presence of our Father. And so that is a comforting thing, even though it's not easy knowing that in this physical world, we cannot make the memories that you hoped you continue to make.
I love pictures because when she came to visit me, like,
you guys took a lot of pictures.
Oh my God, we didn't even realize that we were taking that much. But then I look back and I'm like, honestly, those are like the only adult pictures I have with her. You know, besides the pictures from my wedding. You know, besides the pictures from my wedding, like every other thing else, I was 19 and below. Because we hadn't seen each other for a while, you know. So those are the only adulting pictures I have, and I mean, only God knows why we were able to take a few, and I'm definitely going to cherish them for a very, very long time.
So talking about memories, like from what you have gone through, you know, like how has it changed your perspective about family, about how you treat people, about how you live your own life. Like, can you share? And this will be the last question, actually. Can you share? Okay, the last but one. Can you share one or two things that your experience of, going through grieving your mom, has changed your perspective about life?
Yeah. So, well, the one thing I'll say is I've really taken God a lot more seriously. It's not like I wasn't serious about Him before, but I now totally understand when the statement that goes live every day as if it's your last.
Mm-hmm.
So it has affected how I even try to talk to people. Things that used to make me react so quickly, I just look at it and I just brush it off.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I really, really just need to say something, I try to say it as nice as possible.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that I don't want, God forbid, if today is my last day on earth, I would just go about sinning and not acting like I'm a Christian,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I try to live every day as Christ-like as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
No one is perfect. But it has definitely affected how I relate to people, especially those that are close to me. Because I can be very spontaneous, So I just say things like they are, but I'm holding back on that a little bit. Because you can say certain things and you can't take it back, And I got that from mom and dad. But I realized that when mom came herself, she had changed from that way of being spontaneous, She had become more calm. And I'm definitely learning her ways a lot. Basically all she did while she was here, when I come back from work, she's watching YouTube, gospel music, she's reading her Bible, things. I'm trying to do more of such things. It has definitely changed my perspective in that way. And back in the day before all of this, it's okay, on the day when I feel like I don't feel like doing my quiet time, because I tell myself, okay, if I don't feel like it, then it means I'm not going to mean it if I do it. So then I won't even bother. But now, regardless of how I feel, even if it's just one verse, or one chapter, I try to read it and make sure it means something. And I'm not just doing it because they said you should do your quiet time, or everyone is saying do your quiet time. So number one is I try to make things revolve around God, and how I relate to people. You don't want a situation where you are in a crowd of people, or you're in a place and people don't even realize that you're Christian. That's very easy to happen nowadays. Oh, are you Christian? I didn't even know that. But when it starts coming to the point where your coworkers can say, oh, I've never heard you curse before, I've never heard you use curse words. At least you know that you're making a little bit of progress. But also, you're not letting it get to your head at the same time. And another thing that has changed with me is I take my time to do things. Like I said, this whole being spontaneous thing. You won't see me trying to rush anything anymore. It's it just helps, because what's the point, And another thing is I've really realized deeply what the human body is really nothing, honestly. Once that is gone, it's gone. Because by the time mom passed away, she didn't even look like herself. And believe me, I don't even have any pictures of how she looked. And that was another thing that people that were in Ghana want to see pictures. What do you want to see pictures for? I don't even want to see such pictures, because I was there throughout the whole thing. Those were the last pictures I'll ever want to see, because of how she ended up looking when she passed away. Little things like that. So the human body is just, I don't know how to explain it.
It's a container.
We're just here. Exactly. And I've realized deeply that what really matters is our soul, where it's going after everything. Because once you're lifeless, you're lifeless.
Right.
Who knew? Everybody goes into a body bag at some point, a coffin at some point. All these things are vanity. You come, you come to the world with nothing. You leave with nothing.
Right.
I'm just seeing more perspective, and it's definitely made me mature a lot more too. Because I definitely love the fact that a lot more slow to anger, for sure. I count to 3 before I say anything.
To 9 or 10.
Yeah, unless it's something I'm really passionate about,
Yeah.
I'll say like that's another aspect of it. If there's something I really want to say, I won't hold back, but I'll be very polite about it.
Right.
Because we may have just this one life to live, and you don't want to have any regrets.
Right.
Especially if it's something positive you need to say to someone.
Right. In the book of Psalm, I think it's Psalm 90, it says, teach us to number our days that we may apply our heart to wisdom. When you experience such grief, it kind of dawns on you the brevity of life, how short life is. And I think many of us, we envision, being 90 or 100, but unfortunately not everyone will get that. And so making sure that you do what you have to do while you have the time. And first of all, having a relationship with God, like that should be our top priority. Because like you said, at the end of the day, there is nothing you take with you when you're spending all your days or all your energy just working out to take care of your body, physical body. At the end of the day, you even don't look the same. And then they put you in a bag and then off you go. And so focusing on what is important in this life, and which is first of all God, and also knowing that our days are numbered, and so if it is, serving God, like do it with all your heart and do it now, like don't wait, because tomorrow is never promised to any of us.
Sure. And to add one more thing, this is one of those things where one thing that has changed for me also is it doesn't matter how old you are, so long as you have Christ, when He's ready to call you home, He calls you home. And He doesn't, I realize that He sure doesn't let His people suffer, because that's another thing I'm thankful for, that I'm not saying that, Ghana is a bad place to die, but the healthcare system there, I don't know how they would have handled the situation. Considering everything that I saw, she was at peace, she was not in pain, and she probably would have been in a lot of pain back home, because even here, with all the technology and whatnot, they couldn't even figure out what was wrong in the beginning, because of how she presented in the hospital. But eventually, when I think deeply through the whole thing, she was very peaceful, she was not in pain, and considering what caused her death, she was supposed to be in a lot of pain, if I'll say that. Yeah, she was not in pain, she just went peacefully, and God just called her home. Another point.
Well, we thank God. In all things, we should give thanks, and even this is a blessing. And I know we've talked in the past about even all the blessings concerning her being here in the first place, And so, even though, we grieve her, we also celebrate her life. Like I said during as we're talking, like she was a great person, and her bringing food over here, not once but twice, and we enjoyed it. The fellowship, even during that short time that she was here, she literally almost visited everyone during like such a short period. And so we are grateful to God for her life, and for the lessons that even her death has taught all of us. And thank you so much, for joining me today and sharing your story and words of encouragement for people also going through this, or even bringing understanding to people who haven't gone through it, but to share ways that they can be there for others who are going through this. So I really appreciate all of this. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks for having me. I would like to end with like one Bible verse that I really like also, besides Isaiah 57. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3 to 4. It says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercy and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulations, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble, with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. I just thought that was very deep because it says, you know, He comforts us in all our tribulations, not some, not the ones He chooses to comfort us with, in all our tribulations, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God.
Wow.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. That was very powerful. I have been blessed by this conversation, and I definitely will have Ida back because she has a whole lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm sure you learned one or two things about grief, you know, whether you're going through it yourself or even ways that you can support people who are they themselves going through grief. And may God comfort anyone who is going through such a difficult season in this moment. He is a God of all comfort, and He sees our tears, He hears our cries, and He's close to the brokenhearted. And He said He will comfort you. And so that is my prayer for you today.